Guardians, Volume 2. Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of Marvel Rewind with me, George Efta, where I try to watch every single Marvel Cinematic Universe movie before Endgame comes out in about a month. So we're at one of my all-time favorites in the series. This is probably top 3 for me in terms of personal preference. Guardians Volume 2 is a really special movie to me. It's, I have daddy issues, as I've talked about in another video. If you want to look up Shit I Love, Ego and Peter Have a Catch, I go into detail a lot about that scene. I have daddy issues. I have firm feelings on the idea of family being what you choose, the people you surround yourself with. I have always been the guy, historically growing up anyway, I was always the guy who would push people away, be a professional asshole, be a dick, because I was terrified of anyone leaving me, much like Rocket and Yondu. The redemption arc for those characters in this movie really, really gets to me. The soundtrack is spectacular. It's just good. This movie's kind of made for me. It's perfectly silly in a way that feels specifically like it was meant for just me, kind of. The fact that it ends on a funeral, it ends on a very sad note, but also on a hopeful note, is very unique and special for a movie like this, a big budget Marvel movie like this. The fact that most of the movie isn't really action-based, it's just characters talking and having conversations about things. Very much in my wheelhouse. So yeah, I fucking love this movie. Objectively, I think it's pretty fucking solid, honestly. I think it's better than the first one, which puts me in a very, very strong minority. I think it is a stronger movie, narratively. I think structurally, this one works better. The first one had a really weak villain. And it's really a lot of fun to watch these characters kind of get together, but there's narrative cheats, contrivances in that first one. Drax being such a fucking idiot that he just calls up. Forgot his name already. Ronan. The fact that he just literally calls Ronan up and says, hey, we're on this planet, come get us. I know Drax is a moron, but he's also a very literal person who knows how strong people are. I never really bought that. The climactic sequence of going to destroy the Kree, it's like, I don't know, Ronan's got a power stone. He could just, jump through space, right? Couldn't he just, jump out of his ship and land on the planet? It's fun, don't get me wrong. And the emotionality at the end of Peter seeing his mother and connecting that to Gamora is really great. But it is kind of weak for the rest of the characters. They don't all get really strong character arcs. They're all great. It's nice to see them all. But I think this one does a lot better structurally and character-wise. Everybody in this movie has a character arc of some sort, with the exception of maybe Drax. And even Drax does grow a little bit. His relationship with Mantis is really, really good and cute and heartwarming. Every character here starts one place and ends up someplace else. And it all makes sense, and it's all very rooted in the themes of the movie, which is family and abuse and trauma. And how we grow and move forward when we're victims of abuse and trauma. The fact that Peter doesn't really save the day, the team does, which is kind of foreshadowed in this opening scene, which is playing on the TV behind me. In that opening sequence, which is fantastic, Drax very funnily says, I have single-handedly killed the whatever it is. Well, no, they all had to work together to do it, except for maybe Groot. In the climax of this movie, same thing. Peter has to fight Ego, but everybody played their role, and, Rocket designed the bomb, Groot planted it there, and pushed the button. Everyone kind of had to do what they had to do to win. And the big heroic moment is actually Yondu, kind of the most morally reprehensible character in the movie, aside from Ego, saving Peter's life and sacrificing himself, and that's a really brave thing. The fact that this movie leaves Peter, the first movie ends with Peter having a new family, and we're gonna do something a little good, a little bit bad, maybe a little bit of both. It's a really nice way to end that first movie. This one ends with Peter kind of having something with Gamora starting, but it's sad. He literally watched his mother die in front of him when he was 12 years old. He just had to see his birth father, biological father, turn to dust in his hands, and then he had to finally realize he had a father all along in Yondu, and then watch Yondu die in front of him. It's a really, really sad character arc for Peter, and the last shot of the movie isn't even about Peter or about the Guardians. The last shot of the movie is Rocket crying. One little tear looking up at the Ravager funeral, and it's a really profound way to end a movie, and I think they earn it. I think the movie is so much fun with the opening sequence, with the action sequences, with the jokes, with a giant yellow Pac-Man, with just the sheer joy of seeing Kurt Russell do Kurt Russell stuff. The movie is so much fun that it earns the darker moments, like the conversations between Gamora and Nebula about Thanos, and the moments where Peter finds out that his mother was murdered, the moments where they find a mountain of skulls underneath, and of course the ending. The movie earns its sadness in a way that you feel like it should be there. Life is complex. It's not just gonna space adventure. In the same way that Empire Strikes Back kind of does a thing, which I should maybe mention Star Wars. It's very much a space opera in the vein of Star Wars or the modern Star Treks, Flash Gordon kind of thing. These movies are just really, really fun. There's lots of different planets, there's spaceship battles, there are different weapons, there are different creatures that show up, there's different technology, they're just fun, but they go for the emotional core that Star Wars did and Empire Strikes Back did. And in the same way that Empire ends on a really down note, but on a cliffhanger, this one ends on a down note, but it feels like resolved. All these characters have reached a new place, and I want to see them grow. And unfortunately, James Gunn has been fired, so I have no idea what's going to happen with this franchise. We see them again in Infinity War, and I'll talk about that when I get there. That is 4 years after this one, canonically. So a lot has happened since we last saw those characters in this movie. Guardians 3 was just about to start shooting. They were in pre-production, sets were being built, a script was written, and then James Gunn got fired. So no clue what that movie was going to be, if it was going to be post-Infinity War, if it was going to take place in the middle. They set up a villain at a certain point in this movie who could have showed up in a sequel. We'll never really probably ever get to know what happened. Apparently they're still going to use the script if anybody wants to be a scab and try to direct the sequel. Nobody wants to be that guy. Nobody wants to step in and direct a Guardians movie because James Gunn is all over these things. They're such personal movies for him. From the song choice to the idiosyncratic editing to the goofball humor to the ability to have such heart inside of such craziness, which goes back to Slither for me. I mean, if you haven't seen Slither, Nathan Fillion, Elizabeth Banks, and what's his name? Yondu. I can't remember his name. Who plays Yondu? Internet? Fuck. Michael Rooker. Those three actors. So Elizabeth Banks, Michael Rooker, and Nathan Fillion are in it. And it's a big, crazy, gory CGI blood horror movie with a lot of comedy in it. But at the end of the movie, it's basically a story about a wife and a husband who had a falling out, and he really does love her, and it's a bummer that they can't be in love anymore. And like the emotionality of his movies is very much there all the time, even surrounded by such fucking goofiness. So I honestly can't imagine anyone other than James Gunn directing another Guardians movie. But that's another conversation for another day. This movie. Highlights are the cast, for sure. The cast is spectacular. Michael Rooker is probably the heart of the movie. Maybe. If not him, it's going to be Bradley Cooper, who gives kind of my favorite performance in the whole film. I know it's a vocal performance and maybe some facial stuff. And that Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother, did the on-set kind of physicality of it all, the motion capture. But Rocket's performance is great. The way Bradley Cooper vocalizes every line of dialogue, you really feel it. It doesn't sound like him at all. It's a great performance. Obviously, you have Star-Lord Chris Pratt giving a really, really grounded performance, and he gets to play kind of the straight man in this one, which is great. The only time he gets to really let loose and be goofy is when he's talking with Ego about the nature of his powers. He's like, so I can build whatever I want? We're talking like 80-foot tall Pac-Man and little Godzilla figures, and you can do whatever you want, Peter. Like, I'm going to build some weird shit. Generally speaking, though, he's the straight man. He's got to be the guy reacting to the craziness around him, and he does it really, really well. And you see the agony on his face, the torment, the remorse, the mourning that he has to play basically throughout the whole movie. Nebula, played by Karen Gillan, has a much bigger role this time around than the first one. Her relationship with Gamora, played by Zoe Saldana, is really, really interesting in its own right, and it ties perfectly into the idea of a shitty father. Both of them are really, really good. I love seeing Nebula and Gamora interact together. That relationship just makes sense to me. I don't have any siblings, but I definitely had friends that I'm like, I'm going to throw you off this cliff, but also I will do anything to save your life. And it's a really complex way to feel, and I feel like the movie pulled it off pretty well. You know, friends that I would call siblings, or would have called siblings, and now we've had falling outs, and I can relate to Nebula and Gamora's story. Who else we have in this fucking thing? Drax is once again back again. He doesn't really have a big character arc. He just kind of, you know, learns to embrace Mantis. I do love that actor. I forgot his name again, the wrestler. Fuck, I'm sorry. If it comes to me, I'll say it. He's a really good actor. I hope we get to see him more. He's got some fucking amazing moments in Infinity War when we see him again. That were apparently improv by him. Fuck, what is his name? Probably on the cover of the box. Dave Bautista. Let's cover the box. Dave Bautista is really, really good. Sorry, I keep forgetting your name, man. Vin Diesel's Groot, whatever. Baby Groot's really cute, really cool character. Seeing him be a bit of a meme, a bit of a merchandise opportunity, but he's also a thematic thing. Like, he's the child that all of these children who've had traumatic pasts have to raise. It's really, really compelling. Drax has already been a father before. You know, he saw his daughter killed in front of him. So he actually, maybe that's why he has the kind of easier role in this movie, because he, as you know, he was a good father, presumably. He loved his parents. He tells stories about it in this movie, about his family. You know, he doesn't have a lot of traumatic family stuff beyond losing people. So in this movie, he just kind of gets to be a goofball who is there for his people, and is, you know, there for Baby Drax, or Baby Groot. Everyone's there to be a parent for Baby Groot, which is nice. That's the whole Guardians crew. And then, of course, there's Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's one of my all-time favorite actors. He is fucking brilliant. I remember when Death Proof came out in high school, people would ask me, because even then I was the movie guy, people would say, like, yeah, Death Proof is really good, and I love that Kurt Russell guy. Like, what else has he been in? And I was like, Jesus, The Thing, Escape from New York, Escape from L.A., Dark Blue. And people, I haven't seen any of those. I'm like, Sky High. I'm like, oh yeah, I think I saw Sky High. I love Kurt Russell. I think he's a really, really underrated kind of movie star. I think that given the right material, he's absolutely Oscar worthy. I think he plays genre maybe better than any other actor who's ever lived. He makes you feel that it's real. You know, the most iconic moments in his movies tend to be the humanistic ones. You know, Escape from New York is a really badass movie about a dude with one eye wearing the eye patch, and he's a snake Plissken and yada yada yada. The most iconic moment in that movie isn't an action beat or a fight scene or a line of dialogue. It's when, about 40 minutes in the movie, he realizes shit's fucked. He has no way to achieve his goal, and he just kind of pulls a chair out of rubble and sits it down and just kind of sits there and goes like, didn't say anything, just like, that's Kurt Russell. It's he imbues reality into silliness while also being silly himself perfectly. He's a great comedic actor. He's a great dramatic actor, and when they announced that Kurt Russell was in this movie, anybody who was paying attention to you know, Guardians fandom knew that he had to be Peter's father, and probably was going to be Ego. I don't know how anybody predicted that, but Ego the Living Planet is very much from the comics, a very goofy fucking notion. In the same way that James Gunn managed to turn Guardians into a good movie, a commercial movie in the first place, the idea of taking Ego the Living Planet, one of the crazier characters in the comics, and making it grounded and real and character-based, is pretty fucking impressive. And he plays it so well the whole way through. His turn, his reveal to be a villain is excellent. His goofiness as a dad, and also just like a man who's eternal, is always there. He has warmth. My favorite scene in the movie might be when he's explaining to Peter Quill what the song Brandy means. He's just great. The whole cast here is phenomenal. They interact perfectly with each other. Sean Gunn also plays the Ravager who lives. I can't remember his name. Kraglin? The guy at the end who has the mohawk thing, the arrow. The one mutiny member of the crew who survives. He's also brilliant at it, and he kind of makes me cry at the end when he cheers for the Ravager funeral. He just kind of lets out this, like, everyone else is very somber and kind of looking at each other sadly and quietly talking. When he sees the Ravagers have shown up and launched the space fireworks, he just goes, woo! Yeah! Like, it lets out all the little things that you've been holding in for the last however long since Yondu died. So yeah, the whole cast is fucking phenomenal. To get back to Ego for a minute and talk more about the writing, I think some people would maintain this is another Marvel movie with a bad villain. I disagree. He's not really villainous. He just has a different point of view, which is what makes a great antagonist, a great villain. the god, the Celestial, is fucking eternal. He's been around for millions of years. And for him, the notion of being alone is just like for anybody else, a really, really scary one. Being alone is what makes us our worst. Being alone is what leads to the most negative things inside of us. It's when we have people there to check that shit, people to care about, that we become better. And Ego couldn't find that. He is inherently different. And when he finally found a woman he could love that was going to get in the way of his ultimate goal of, creating more like him, he destroyed her, which is almost noble, at least in his head. It's a really, really interesting character if you spend some time to think about it. In the context of an action movie that you're watching for the first time, it is a little bit like, oh, okay, he's a bad guy because he wants to destroy the universe, which is true. He does want to destroy the universe, but it's not just destroy. He wants to assimilate. He wants to control. He wants it to be everything. He wants to feel accepted. He wants to feel part of something bigger than himself, which we all do, but he can't. The weakest moment in the movie, for sure, the one thing that knocks it down from being kind of a perfect thing in my eyes. I mean, I have to analyze it more before I could give it a perfect 10 out of 10. That's rare. I mean, even Iron Man I wouldn't give necessarily 10 out of 10. But one of the things that knocks it down, like almost the whole point probably, is at the end when he's talking to Peter, and Peter shoots him a bunch of times. A moment I love. You killed my mom, blam, blam, blam. He turns into Hasselhoff for a minute, which is a nice little cameo, but it's a moment in the movie that I don't want a laugh. I want to be invested, and also a plot hole for me where I'm like, well, Gamora knows that Peter Quill envisioned Hasselhoff as his father. How does Ego know that? Did he tell him? And if he did tell him, and I just watched this movie, I don't remember it. So that kind of bummed me out a little bit. But otherwise, I think Ego is a really interesting, fascinating character. I think the idea of an ageless, eternal being who is just fucking lonely is a really profound, sad one. And I feel like the negativity and darkness that comes out of that is inevitable. Of course he's a fucking villain. He's been alone forever. That'll make you do crazy things. Loneliness is a terrible thing. The soundtrack is fucking great. I think the soundtrack to this movie is better than the first one. Although, admittedly, one of the songs I love the most on the CD is Fox on the Run, which isn't in the movie. I think it was in the trailer, and that's a bummer. I don't like that. But yeah, I love the songs in this movie. Brandy is a brilliant fucking song. This song made me reevaluate my thoughts on Fleetwood Mac with that song, The Chain. And that whole album, Rumors, is great. The goofiness of having Lakeshore Drive, LSD, folks, in a movie that is this colorful and goofball and little floating bubbles that explode into more colorful floating bubbles is great. The song at the end, Fathers and Sons, is just profoundly perfect for this movie and very, very sad and also kind of warm. In a lot of ways, this movie reminds me a bit of Manchester by the Sea, which I reviewed. You can go find it in my Hesitant Movie Reviews. In that review, I say that it's going to sound weird, but as sad and as bleak as this movie is, it feels kind of familiar. It feels welcoming. Grief, as portrayed in Manchester by the Sea, feels familiar. It feels relatable to me. Same thing with this one. Like, this is a very sad, goofy... It's a goofy movie, but it's also very, very sad, but in a way that, like, you just kind of want to... You understand how it feels. It's that idea of, like, celebrating the people who were here as briefly as they were. Acknowledging these people people make mistakes, that you made mistakes, but there's always a way to kind of redeem yourself. It's a really emotional movie for me. And beyond the personal being emotionally invested, it's just fun. Like I said during Guardians, I love a good opening credit sequence. The opening credit sequence of this movie is fucking great, with little baby Groot running around and the battle in the background. The motivating moment of Rocket stealing the batteries is perfectly in character. It's funny, and it leads to serious consequences. And the middle act of the movie, where everyone isn't really actioning, but is just kind of hanging out. I dropped my thing. Everyone just kind of hanging out, having conversations, and wondering about what lies ahead, is also really, really fascinating and done well, I think. I don't think the movie is slow. The pacing is good. It lets you breathe. After a big-ass action sequence, there are moments to let the characters breathe. There's a great moment with Gamora sitting by herself in a field, and there's like a couple of flowers kind of making a very quiet little noise. and she's clearly annoyed by it. She just fucking shing and chops it off with her sword. Little character moments like that in between the bigger, emotional fight scenes. And then after a bit of quieter conversations, it cuts back to a big action sequence, the rocket in the woods, bouncing guys up in the trees, or whatever it might be. I think this movie's paced pretty well. I think it's pretty great. I think it's better than a lot of the MCU movies on just like a technical level, on a screenplay level, on a structural character level. I mean, the CGI is great. All the movies look good. You can't spend this much money and have a movie look bad. Except for Thor Ragnarok. Or not Thor Ragnarok. Excuse me. Thor Ragnarok's fucking brilliant. Thor The Dark World is actually really kind of ugly to look at and kind of poorly shot. And the first Thor does a lot of that canted angle shit. But generally speaking, these movies all look good. They all have pretty good CGI. So for me, judging quality, not personal taste, but quality, it's about structure and character and motivations and how many plot contrivances do we need to have, that kind of a thing. Then the climax of the movie takes place on a planet that is actually a guy who is the villain, so they needed to find ways to make him not immediately overpowered. So Mantis can put him to sleep, and you'd buy the idea that an eternal being who's plagued by loneliness and maybe even guilt for destroying all these children would need a creature to help him sleep. So they set that up early. It pays off here. When he's, as a planet, destroying all the Guardians, Peter fights back, and you'll buy the idea, well, he's distracted right now. He needs to focus all of his energy onto Peter. So they do find ways to make the ridiculous scenarios feel logical, if only for a moment. So for me, this movie's pretty goddamn great. I know I'm in the minority on that. Let me know in the comments why I'm wrong, why you liked Guardians 1 more, why this movie eats dick, whatever. Please let me know. Yeah, so that's all I got to say on this one. I believe that next is Spider-Man Homecoming, with another movie that I really like. Like I said, Phase 3 is all pretty great. So this one is one of the best of the phase. I mean, Phase 3 is still going on, technically. But it's one of the best for me, and it definitely, in terms of the pre-Infinity War of it all, really, really gets you jonesing to hate on Thanos. The stories about making these two young girls fight each other and ripping Nebula's eye out, ripping her skull out, ripping her arm off. It's really, 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 really makes you want to fucking see Thanos pay. So I have nothing but love for this movie, and I will see you next time with Spider-Man Homecoming here on Marvel Rewind. Bye. End credit tags in this movie, and I'm not going to do 5 of them, and most of them don't matter. Most of them are just jokes or little character moments. We get to see a teenage Groot for a second being surly. We get to see Kraglin playing with the arrow and the mohawk. We get to see Stan Lee again. Little funny stuff. The only one that really feels like a real tag is the first one, which is setting up Adam. And I guess I forgot to mention this in the main review. The other antagonist in this video, or in this movie, in this movie is the Legion. I just watched it. I can't remember what they're called. The Gold people, who are all about perfection and evolution and stuff. The Sovereign, that's what they're called. They, at the end of the, at every turn, they're beaten and destroyed. There is a plot hole I forgot to mention, which is, I don't know how the fuck they figured out everybody was on Ego, the planet, at the end. I don't know how that works, but whatever. They're a really interesting space force, and it's really, it broadens the universe for me a lot to see them. Their grievance is legitimate. Fucking Raccoon stole their batteries. And the end of the movie sees the High Priestess revealing that there's a birthing pod that has the next evolution of their race, which is the perfect warrior, perfect being. And if I don't know my Marvel history that well, but if I remember correctly, Adam is kind of like Captain Marvel, one of the most OP, strongest fucking things in the entire universe. So that's the tag that matters. The rest of it are all fun. The whole end credits is very, very quick to watch. The music's great. It's got kind of a high school 80s yearbook vibe to it. Anyway, so that's that. I'm not going to be doing another cut back to me talking. Thank you, as always, for watching, and I will see you next week on Monday with, I believe, Spider-Man Homecoming. If not Spider-Man Homecoming, then whatever it is that's supposed to be next, that'll be what I review next. Bye!
Shing!